Do you have a rental property and you're feeling squeezed by the recent rate hikes by the Bank of Canada? Well, join me at the CN Tower for the upcoming interest rate protest so I can explain to you why I have absolutely no sympathy for your position. I'm just kidding. That's actually horribly insensitive. I, like a lot of my clients, do own rental property in Ontario, and what I'm going to be talking about today is why new Ontario government policy is going to improve the positions of a lot of landlords. So stay tuned, and I'm going to try and present a balanced perspective on what this announcement means from the perspective of existing owners, of hopeful real estate investors, and from tenants in the Ontario real estate market. I want to tell you a story about when I was in a position where I was up against a variable rate mortgage that was increasing, and I was feeling that stress. And one of the ways out for me that I ultimately ended up exercising was to add a rental unit into a detached garage to increase the yield of the property so that I could afford the mortgage. This was a house that I was house hacking at the time. I was living in one of the units, and I needed to increase the income to make the economics of the deal make sense for me. And so I personally think that one of the reasons this policy is going to be so impactful in the current environment, while we're up against increasing interest rates, we're hearing about people having to commit fraud to get shelter, people protesting interest rate hikes. This is a very meaningful potential solution for people to make the income of their property better. You can have somebody else you can provide affordable housing for a tenant while also having a tenant help provide financial support for you in a position where you can't afford your mortgage, because more and more people are having a hard time affording their mortgage every single day as interest rates increase in Canada.
And it's only going to get worse.
It is only going to get worse.
Say it again.
It is. It's only going to get worse. Yeah, so let's pull up an article here from the Toronto Star. Doug Ford will cut development fees on affordable housing, but municipalities could take a financial hit. Basically, there's an explanation here on how the province is going to be taking away the keys from the municipalities in order to expedite the doubling of municipal zoning on single-family residential properties. So you can now add a second unit into any property without any changes to the zoning. All that you need is a building that conforms to the Ontario Building Code. So you have to build it with proper ingress and egress, proper fire separation between units, but without having to jump through any hurdles or red tape with the zoning bylaw or zoning bylaw amendments, which is often a non-starter or preventative for most owners, investors, and developers who want to bring a second unit to one of their rental properties, as an example.
Funny, I think many of us look back on that time of bullishness around laneway suites as being really promising. Can you explain to us how this might be different from the excitement we saw before?
Yeah, I can. I think that it is interesting. This is probably going to increase that. You could say a frenzy. I think that a lot of the frenziedness around laneway suites especially is almost like this like pent up interest, because, and this is it's actually a really good reflection of what's happening in the market. A lot of people want to build laneway suites, but very few people can build laneway suites. And so there's like pent up demand for the construction of laneway suites. And this red tape, this slow process of approvals and construction has made it so it's something that a lot of people are talking about, and projects that actually get completed get a lot of attention, but you're not seeing them have a meaningful impact on the market because it takes so long for them to get to market. Now, what we're seeing with this new province-wide policy that's being instituted is they're actually making it easier to get projects like that done. So the idea would be you can put 2 units into an existing building, and then if you have a second building on the property, you can have a third unit. So there's an accessory dwelling unit in building number 1, functionally making it a duplex, and then a detached accessory dwelling unit, or ADU, in a detached structure. So like a garage, as an example, would be a good conversion into a garden suite or laneway home. And so I think the hype was actually pent up demand for construction of laneway houses. And now we're actually going to see all of that demand get pushed into creation of rental supply, hopefully.
I recently saw there was debate going on in just north of Toronto, Newmarket, and Aurora. One mayor is really bullish on the idea of laneway suites and accessory dwellings, but then Aurora, a place that's famous for NIMBYism, they're pretty scared. What does this mean for places that are scared about increasing supply in their neighborhoods?
I think the reality is that we're really only 1 or 2 elections away from it not mattering, because right now, I mean, our generation doesn't vote. Millennials aren't showing up at the polls. The Toronto election just proved that. Actually, all municipal elections just proved that. We're still not showing up at the polls, even though there are issues that are important to us, and affordable housing is one of those leading issues. Aurora would be a great example, especially when you're comparing it to Newmarket, where you have a much younger population in Newmarket and a much older, wealthier population in Aurora. Those are the people who are likely to resist things like garden suites because they associate it with something wrong. That affordable housing is creating these terrible issues in neighborhoods or whatever it is, and I think that's a social issue that we even have that stigma around affordable housing. Newmarket being an exceptional example, what's called the Patch colloquially in the community in York Region was actually an affordable housing development for people to work at Upper Canada Mall in the past. And these are necessary things for a community to function properly. You need people of all shapes and sizes and income levels to make a community whole. So that's what the vitality of a community is based on.
I recently saw a tweet from former mayor candidate Stephen Pinwasi, and he has a different perspective on this. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so he retweeted something that was said by a realtor that was a bullish statement, and the bullish statement was that this would increase the prices of houses because now you can double the density of existing homes. And so just to back up, and maybe we should put this explanation at the beginning, Doug Ford, this is from BlogTO, Doug Ford promises to make more affordable duplexes and triplexes in Ontario soon. Basically what's happening is provincial policy is going to make it so that you can put 2 units in any house in the province of Ontario as long as it meets Ontario Building Code requirements and doesn't change the square footage of the house. So the realtor's statement was that this is instantly going to increase the value of homes because now you can put 2 units in it, so they must be worth so much more. But the reality is that's not the case. It might increase because there's no degree of competition. You can do it in every house in the province. So yeah, sure, it makes the potential yield or the potential output of all of those homes more valuable, or it increases the output. And this is talking about for other investors. Yeah, you can, if you have 2 suites are better than 1. So now all of a sudden your rental yield goes up. However,
that was the exact same argument with laneway suites.
Right.
It was, oh my gosh, I can now build a laneway suite. This house is worth more. Look at the setback requirements, and this house can absorb that, or this property can absorb that. It didn't happen.
Well, laneway suites are interesting because the zoning wasn't worth that much because, I think a lot of people overestimated how much value that was going to bring. And the reality is because you're building a brand new suite with a laneway house, a brand new home. And that's expensive. That's not cheap. We've interviewed people who are building laneway houses. They're spending $400 a foot. That's more expensive than building a brand new house on a suburban lot because you got to do it in a dense urban environment. It's difficult for that to have impact. But if you're talking about converting a detached garage as an example, or converting an existing basement as an example into a basement apartment, your per square foot construction cost is going to be way lower. So the net impact of you putting a rental suite in the basement of a raised bungalow or in the detached garage of a suburban home is a lot more affordable as a landlord, and therefore the return on the investment that you're putting in is a lot better. With that being said, I don't necessarily think it's going to push a bunch of prices up because now all of a sudden, one of the other things that causes prices to go up is the increase in rents, and that's caused by excess demand for rental. If all of a sudden, everybody in the province of Ontario can now legally put an extra unit in all of their buildings, then instantly you've got more rental supply coming online. And so you're no longer in an excess demand for rental. And so that should have an easing pressure, deflationary pressure on rental rates. As we start getting into that over time, I think it'll balance out between what Stephen calls an increase in housing prices and what I would call a decrease in rental prices. Yeah, so the question is whether or not that deflationary pressure on rents is actually going to even make it good for landlords who want to add a unit, because maybe they're thinking, okay, I'm going to spend $100,000 to add this new unit, and they're anticipating the rent on that unit is going to be $1,500. And so that's a 15% rate of return on that money that they would have spent, as an example. But now, because rents are getting deflationary as a result of this potential supply flood of rentals, all of a sudden, we're now seeing that rate of return dwindling, and maybe that rent's down to 11%. That's still an exceptional rate of return, and there's still an incentive for that owner to create that unit. Until those construction costs, right, they were exceptionally high, and now they're coming down. So the economics of adding a suite to a rental property have never been better. And the lack of red tape now, or the red tape that is being erased by this provincial policy decision, is going to make it easier and easier to capitalize on those new improved economics that we're seeing in the market. So just like you, I've been in a position where I felt trapped by the red tape, trapped by variable rate mortgages. I've been out the other side of it, and it was through policy opportunities like the ones that we saw right now. And I'm not going to lie to you, I might have played in the gray area a little bit of the Ontario Building Code to make that happen. The fact that now that is a position that is going to be achievable for everybody within existing zoning requirements, as long as they're conforming to the Ontario Building Code to make sure that they are providing a safe and habitable unit for tenants. I really think this is a big win for both existing landlords, for future investors who want to create value in the housing market, and for tenants who are looking for better quality of living at more affordable prices. Thank you for joining me today. I really enjoyed doing this little review of the current events in the Ontario real estate market, and I hope that you join me again next week for another little update on what's happening out there. Do you have a rental property and you're feeling squeezed